Right now, somewhere, a parent is scrolling their phone at 1 a.m., terrified they're failing their kid. Not enough screen time limits. Not enough enrichment. Not enough one-on-one bonding time. Modern parenting feels like a job with no backup and no room for error. But for 99.9% of human history, no parent ever raised a child alone. Not even close. A baby born 50,000 years ago had more adults keeping it alive than a baby born today has relatives in the same zip code. So what did child raising actually look like before the nuclear family? The answer might make you angry at how much we've lost and how recently we lost it. Let's start with a number that breaks the whole modern parenting model. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy spent decades studying primates and hunter-gatherer societies, and she found something that contradicts almost everything we assume. Humans are not built to raise children in isolated pairs. We are what scientists call cooperative breeders. That means a human infant survival never depended on just a mother and father. It depended on a whole network. Grandmothers, aunts, uncles, older siblings, even unrelated adults in the same camp. Researchers call this network allo parents, and the data on how much they actually did is staggering. Among the Agta foragers of Central Africa, fathers are within arm's reach of infants more than half the time during the first few months of life. They physically hold their babies for roughly a fifth of the hours in camp. That's a level of hands-on fatherhood modern parents would call unusually devoted. It was just normal. But fathers were only part of it. Among the Agta hunter-gatherers of the Philippines, alloparents, not the mother, provide close to 3/4 of all direct infant care, and an even larger share once a child passes toddlerhood. A baby might be held, fed, soothed, or watched by a dozen different people before the sun goes down. Why does this matter so much? Because a human baby is, biologically speaking, an unreasonable demand. Human infants are born more helpless and stay dependent longer than almost any other species on Earth. A newborn chimpanzee can cling to its mother's fur within hours. A human newborn can't even hold up its own head. Raising that kind of child while gathering food, defending against predators, and keeping older kids alive was never a two-person job. It was a group project, and the presence of a maternal grandmother was directly linked to higher child survival rates in forager populations. Grandmothers weren't a bonus. They were, in many cases, the difference between a child living and dying. Now, here's where it gets even more uncomfortable for modern parents. Ancient childhood wasn't just cooperatively raised, it was radically independent. In many hunter-gatherer societies, small children are given a level of physical freedom that would get a modern parent a visit from child services. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, toddlers have been observed handling knives. In parts of Papua New Guinea, infants are allowed close enough to open fires that childhood burn scars are common among adults, because the culture treats a baby's contact with fire as the baby's own business to learn from, not something to be prevented at all costs. This wasn't neglect. It was a completely different philosophy of what a child is capable of, and what a child is owed in terms of autonomy. That autonomy extended to how children actually learn. In most of the modern world, learning is delivered to children, in classrooms, on a schedule, through instruction. But researchers studying foraging societies found something almost the opposite. Children spend enormous amounts of their day in mixed-age, self-directed play. And it's largely other children, not adults, who do the teaching. Older kids show younger kids how to dig for tubers, how to start a fire, how to track an animal, how to settle an argument. This kind of child-to-child transmission through open-ended play was one of the primary ways skills and survival knowledge moved forward. Adults set the boundaries. Kids ran the classroom. So what happened? How do we go from a village of a dozen caregivers to 2 exhausted parents Googling, "Is it normal for a 2-year-old to?" at midnight? The shift wasn't gradual. It tracks almost exactly with the move away from mobile, small band living, when humans settled into agricultural villages, and then, much later, industrial cities, something the extended kin network had quietly provided for 300,000 started to disappear. Families got smaller, households got more private, work moved away from the home, which meant the adults who used to be available all day as alloparents were suddenly gone for 8, 10, 12 hours at a stretch. By the mid-20th century in the Western world, the model had narrowed down to a single mother alone in a house, for most of the day expected to do the job that used to take a dozen people. And here's the part almost nobody says out loud. If a parent today feels like they're drowning, that is not a personal failure. It's a mismatch. You're trying to run a job designed over 300,000 years to be distributed across an entire community, and you're running it alone, in a house with a locked door, with a phone full of advice from strangers instead of a grandmother down the path. The exhaustion isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign the support structure your biology expects simply isn't there anymore. None of this means ancient parenting was easy or safe, or something to romanticize wholesale. Child mortality in these societies was brutally high by modern standards, and the freedom given to children came with real risks. Most parents today would never accept, but the core structure, that no single adult was ever meant to carry a child's entire upbringing alone, that wasn't a flaw in the ancient system. It might be the single most important thing we quietly dismantled. For most of human history, a child belonged not to 2 people, but to a circle. A father who held them nearly as often as their mother, a grandmother whose presence alone could tip the odds of survival, an older sibling teaching them how to make fire in a game that didn't feel like a lesson at all. That circle is what got our species through 300,000 years of an unforgiving world. And somewhere along the way, without ever deciding to, we let it close down to one or two exhausted people behind a closed door. Maybe the loneliest thing about modern parenting isn't anything we're doing wrong. Maybe it's just the size of the circle we're doing it alone in. If this changed how you think about parenting, subscribe. More true stories history forgot to teach.